I'm your host, Sim Vandalen, and you're listening to Metanoia Discourse, a podcast about the journey of the change in one's way of life. And this is where I bring people's journey to you so you can learn from it and implement the things that you want to implement and create the changes you want to create in your life. In this episode, I talked to Krav Maga master Tommy Blom. We talked about a host of different things that has come on his journey and that have somehow changed or impacted or influenced his way of life, so the way he lives his life. And the idea was to give you a bird's eye view of the progression things took and the natural evolution of his way of life. And then we delve deeper in some topics that I think anyone can benefit from. I didn't interject, as in interrupt or cut in on certain terms that we used because I wanted to keep the natural flow of the conversation as much as possible. I will, however, put these in the notes down below, so if there's a term you're not familiar with, then you can scroll past the timestamps and you will find it in the description. We also will have the timestamps, notes, and the resources that are talked about in the description of the video. I've tried to keep the segues as natural as possible so that we could delve into topics I was the most curious about and have the most benefit for everyone. So, without further ado, I present to you the talk I had with Tommy Blom. Bro, okay. So we're live. I'm gonna just full screen my thing here as well. All right, thank you, Tommy, for coming on. Right, so as we kind of were chatting before recording started, it's about like your journey and how things have developed since you started your journey, right? So in health, in movement, in fitness, whatever we want to call it.
Yeah.
So let's start with how you got into handball, right? Because I know it's a very popular sport in Sweden, but let's just hear about that.
Yeah, so that was actually pretty basic. My whole the class that I was in, basically all the guys in the class, not all the guys, but most of the guys there were doing sports. They played soccer. I never liked soccer, and then we tried out handball. We got stuck with that, and I did that from I was 11 till I was 19, 20 or something like that. When it was time for army conscript time, I kind of quit handball and did a little bit of it afterwards. But mainly we played together. We were the same team from the same guys from we were 11 till we were 19.
That's really cool.
A good crew.
Yeah. During that time, especially as you were growing up in handball, did you get exposed to a lot of strength stuff there already, or is that something that came later?
No, so physical training, or strength training came when we were supposed to get into the senior team when you were a junior, when you were like 15, 14, 15, around there, and you're starting to expose to train with the seniors. Handball players tend to be pretty big. So if you look at them now, they're at least, if you're smaller than 190 and 100 kilos, you're a small player, right? They're really, really big nowadays, much bigger now than before. So when we got into it, we kind of we started trying to transfer into that. We needed to start to put some muscle on. So yeah, we did basic. Back then it was basic bodybuilding, weight training. It was like
Gotcha.
The basic training, the bench, the squats, the whatever was in the gym, and you didn't put we didn't get a lot of technique and how to just basically we got sponsored, I think, with a gym card to get to a gym. We started training there by ourselves and a little bit with the coaches. Yeah.
All right. And was it after your conscription that you got into Krav Maga, or was it before?
No, it was after. It was after. Okay. I was I finished conscript, got out, and I always wanted to do or Thai boxing. I started a little bit when I tried it like 3 times when I was 15, but because of handball or everything else, I never got into it. Because we trained, you know, 4 days, 4 or 5 days a week.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
And play games in the weekend, so there was no time for anything else. So when I got out the conscript, I had thought of doing some martial arts because I always was interested in it. And basically, I ran into 2 guys with Krav Maga shirts. I had returned a VHS cassette back at that time. I'd returned a video to a video store. I walked out, 2 guys walks in with Krav Maga shirts on, and I looked at it, saw Israeli self-defense, Israeli martial arts. But then I started walking home. I didn't think much of it. So about 30, 40 meters later, I was like, no, I need to go back and ask what that is.
Yeah.
That's basically how I got into Krav Maga, because they just started the first Krav Maga club in Sweden.
Okay.
This was 1994. So I started training there. I started learning, and it was like 500-600 meters from where I lived.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I got my own key. I cleaned the floors.
Old school.
I mopped the floors. And then I could spend time on the heavy bag and the bags and all the other equipment. Yeah, so it was a little bit like that, old school type training. Then EL came to Sweden that year. I think it was that year. And we did some seminars in Gothenburg, in south of Sweden. We did some seminars in Stockholm. Or EL did seminars, and I traveled. I was his driver mainly.
Oh, that's cool.
and one of the kind of students there. Yeah.
Yeah, so you got to actually pick up a lot like quite early on, right?
Yeah.
That's a really nice way to get locked into it.
Yeah, definitely. It was
That's
a good
awesome.
thing.
And was there a point as you, I guess maybe when you started grading, that made you really go like, okay, I kind of get this feeling that I want to keep doing it, or maybe start instructing, or maybe it was less, or maybe it was more of a natural process that just kind of fell into?
Yeah, I liked it. It's hard to say, but I felt it was easy for me. It came natural for me, and I mean, I had the physical skills or motorical skills from being active with handball all my life, and everything around that. Always been physical, you know, climbing trees, running, jumping, you know, biking, everything like that. Natural movement. But so we did gradings, and then there was an instructor course planned in 1996. That was the first one. Me and Rune and some other guys who still active was on that one. And it was like not just a natural step for me to move into that. And so I just followed the flow where it felt natural. And that was actually really natural.
Awesome. Because then from there on out, as your Krav Maga journey started developing, when was it that you did your black belt test, your expert 1?
I don't remember.
No, that's fine. All right.
Actually, I think it was around 98. I did my black belt or expert 1. Yeah, 98, I think.
Did they have the patches back then already, or was it still belts?
No, we had. So when I started, I have yellow, orange, and green belt in Krav Maga. I don't have the belts anymore, unfortunately. I don't know. They're gone somewhere. I still have the diplomas though. And then when around 96, when I did the instructor course, I was advanced practitioner 4. Because we didn't have graduate back then. We had practitioner 1, 2, and 3, advanced practitioner 4 and 5, and then expert.
Yeah. So
Then
that
those got split into like half and half. Like first 2.5 was practitioners, and the last was graduates and so on.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, it was an expert 1 diploma. I didn't get a black belt.
Okay, cool. And was it kind of around that time as well where you had set your sights on doing that full time?
I actually started, so me and another guy called his name Stellan. We started a bodyguard company, and he stayed with that, and I went into, because he's also a Krav Maga instructor, so we went into we had Krav Maga part of the company, and then we kind of split. He stayed with that part, and I went through Krav Maga. But my main start of like doing Krav Maga full time and professionally was around 2002, when Krav Maga was introduced in the Swedish Army.
Okay, cool. And were you then involved with teaching that to the
Yeah.
Awesome.
So there was Eyal, Amnon at that time, me, and some other guys who were helping out setting up the in-house system for the Swedish Army or Swedish Defense Force. It was from all regiments, from all branches back then. And we did the instructor courses, and we were there for 3 years doing the instructor courses. We worked on the in-house system, creating the first part, like the first idea of it, and then we helped developing or teaching the examiners, and the examiners later on became the guys who taught their in-house system to the instructors, who could teach it to the soldiers. Wow. So spent some time there. It was a good time. Yeah,
it's very cool. Actually, I had no idea that it was a part of the Swedish like combative curriculum.
It is. It's been changed now, as far as I know. Not completely. It still has parts of it, I think. But yeah, back then it was Krav Maga.
Awesome. All right. Shifting gears a little bit. Around which time did you start getting introduced to kettlebells, and where did that come from?
That was in 2005. I started lifting kettlebells for the first time. I had some good friends who came back from the US. They've been lifting barbells according to one of Pavel's books, Power to the People.
Right.
He came home, Joachim Engberg, he's a MMA coach. He came home, and we lifted weights according to that. Then we knew that Pavel had written a book called The Russian Kettlebell Challenge, which became the RKC. And then another friend, Anders, worked at Fighter Magazine at the time. He traveled to Denmark and met up with Kenneth J and some other guys, the guys who were kettlebell instructors already back then. He came back, and he introduced me to the kettlebell training in 2005, and the year after, 2006, Anders, me, and another Swedish guy, which is not from us, we went down and became certified as the I guess first kettlebell instructors in Sweden in 2006.
Awesome.
So that's where it started.
Yeah, way ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Because I think
good sometimes and bad sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, if we put that in perspective for people that aren't very familiar with kettlebells, I think kettlebells didn't really start rising in popularity until, I don't know, like 2016 or something. That became like really popular and just kind of had its year or something or two, maybe, that it was at the forefront of, let's say, the fitness revolution.
Yeah, so I would say that, Pavel brought kettlebells to the West, let's say that. in and I think that the first kettlebell certifications were in 2002. And but it's I think we're at least 6, 7, 8 years before the main bulk of people open their eyes for it.
Yeah.
We started traveling. I started selling kettlebells and traveled Sweden with a Land Rover Defender full of kettlebells, which I used for seminars. I used them for the workshops and then sold them because there were no kettlebells to buy. So I was like a traveling kettlebell teacher, salesman. Yeah. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. It was a good time.
Yeah, it sounds like fun, because especially like those are already two fields that you were very early in, right? Doing seminars in Krav Maga, or going around with it all in the beginning, and then doing this with the kettlebells back in the day. So that's really cool. Yeah. And at what time was it? Around that time when you started taking strength training more seriously, that you started tinkering with your nutrition as well?
So my strength training, I mean, the training started around there. I mean, the way of how to train that you got through the instructor courses with the kettlebells, that changed my way of thinking of training. Because I didn't have like a system before. I didn't have that way of thinking of quality before quantity and all that, all that part. Nutrition came for me later. It came later, I think. No, but actually I started doing Warrior Diet around 2006, I think. That was also, I mean, Ori Hofmeckler, who wrote that book, was also connected to the same organization that Pavel was, writing the Warrior Diet book. So I read it about it there. Started doing that, and in that also all the stuff about the LCHF, like the low carb diets and the keto, all that stuff came in. So I'd say that I've tried all of those diets for a while, for good and bad. But I mean, I've tried the low carb. I tried keto, really strict. I've tried zone diet. That's used by CrossFit a lot. And I was introduced to that by Rune, actually, and tried that, and that actually worked. It was a nice way. But the only thing that really stuck with me was the intermittent fasting. I switched to the 16-8, like the lean gains type of eating, for I don't know when. It was just that it becomes so strict with the 20 and 4. It becomes really restrictive of your days. And then same thing with the 16 and 8. Actually, it becomes too restrictive. So for me now, it's the only thing I don't do, and that happens naturally, is I don't eat breakfast. I just eat breakfast around 12, 1.
Your first meal.
When I feel like it. If I have my boys at home, I'll eat breakfast with them. Nice. So I have nothing. I have kind of no diet that I'm strict to now. The intermittent fasting happens by itself because I'm used to it, and I don't get hungry in the mornings, and I work well. I really don't want to train hard with the full stomach, so depends on when I'm training also.
Makes sense. And then that's also one of the main things as why I wanted to have you on as the first guest, because I remember you posting the Warrior Diets on your Facebook, and I can't even remember how I found you. I know it was something Krav Maga related, maybe something that somebody else posted from somewhere, and I was like, oh, this dude is a really built. So I was like, all right, let's see, like what he's about. And then it
Yeah.
was, you've posted some things that were probably more health related, but sporadically. And then the Warrior Diet came up. I was like,
Yeah.
this has got to be interesting. And
Yeah.
then I found it online, I read it, and that's actually when I started doing intermittent fasting as well, which
Nice.
helped me, yeah, which benefited me quite greatly, which was very interesting because, I guess it's kind of the same, or from what I know from Sweden and just general Western culture, it's kind of like you have your set eating times, and it's like if you don't have your 3 meals and your couple of snacks, then things are gonna go wrong according to them, right? And it was a
Yeah.
complete paradigm shift in my head. I was like, my parents thought it was really weird, right? Because that's just the way parents are when you're, I think I was like 20,
Yeah.
20 something. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna stop like eating breakfast, and they're like, okay, what's going on? I like changing the way I ate towards
Yeah.
the Warrior Diet, where I think part of it was like having your carbs and your protein separate or something, if I recall it
No.
vaguely.
No.
No? Okay.
No, so Warrior diet is it's like 20 and 4. You have
Mm,
your I mean, the way, at least the way I followed it was like you
mm,
have one main meal in the evening, you have a
mm.
4-hour eating window where you
Gotcha.
really eat. And if
Mm,
you're training during the day, you will eat you can eat some nuts,
mm,
you can eat some carrots, some berries in the day.
mm.
And if you train, you eat some lean chicken or something like that, or
No.
lean proteins
Mm,
before and around the training.
mm,
But you have your main eating window
mm.
in the evening. And
No.
then if I remember correctly, you start with leafy greens
Mm,
and some oil or something like that, and then you
mm.
go for your proteins, and then you finish with your carbs.
Oh yeah, okay,
And
so that was
uh,
it.
something like that.
Mm,
I never followed that because at the same time I was kind of playing around with the low carb. So I
mm,
ate mainly meat in the
mm.
evenings. That's what there was a lot of people remembering for me for my burgers and so on. So, but
Nice.
remembering me, but I mean that there was a lot of people reacting to that.
Mm. Yeah, but that's very cool because that's I think I have it on my Kindle actually, the Warrior Diet, and I read a part of it. It was the one of the first books, and it's, I mean, it's old in retrospect of where we are at now, but at that time when it was talking about the nervous system, it was
Yeah.
very ahead of the curve, right? How your parasympathetic nervous system is involved in digestion. And
Mhm.
the funny thing is that has come up quite often, of course, or maybe it's not, of course, it's not obvious to people as it is right now, but as it's becoming more present. But
Yeah.
this was when I had another read through that intro. I was like, wow, I can't believe I missed that at that time. It just went way over my head. I was like, nervous system, what?
Yeah.
I'm just here to get healthier and leaner. So
Yeah.
it's actually full of gems still, even though some of the concepts might be slightly outdated. But I would say that a lot of it did did a did a very proficient job at making people leaner and stronger for a period.
Yeah. But I would say that thanks to being like hunting all the time when you're not eating,
Mm,
you're kind of in a sympathetic response all the time,
mm,
which doesn't fit everybody regarding if they have a high stress work.
mm,
I mean, if they're already high stress with work and life and so on, and then you add a diet that adds to your sympathetic responses,
mm,
it can increase the stress levels
mm.
if you have somebody who's already up there. I never had that issue. I mean, I did Warrior Diet when I did my fights.
Mm. Oh, that's
Uh,
impressive.
yeah, so when it was time to cut weight, the only thing I did was skip 2 dinners
Mhm.
because I mean, what we did to cut weight 2 weeks before we cut the carbs, but I was already not eating carbs. I mean, at that time I was doing like the low carb diet.
Yeah.
And so and then 2 days ahead you stop eating to drop weight, right? And since I only ate dinners at that time, the only thing I did was skip 2 dinners.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was kind of used to being hungry, so it wasn't that much of an issue for me. Except the last time, just before weigh-in and fights, and you like you also dropped weight with losing water. So that's at the end of it, of course. But yeah. So,
that's a very interesting tactic, right? I know that there's a lot of frowning upon that in the weight cutting scene for, well, professional to amateur athletes. It almost doesn't matter, right? There's like a golden standard that people try to maintain. I mean, that being said, there's also very little room for bio-individuality in these types of discussions as a whole, right? What works for you? I mean, if it worked and you performed well, there's really no.
But to be honest, I would never go low carb again. For me, I mean, that's the reason why I quit it, because I had no energy for training. I mean, all things I do mainly is anaerobic, right? Which means you need glycogen. You need to refill and replenish your glycogen stores to be able to explode.
Yeah.
And if you're on a strict keto, it becomes really, really hard to have in, because there's no glycogen, right? You're not getting it, and you're not getting that fuel that you need for. So every kettlebell swing is anaerobic, every punch is anaerobic, every sprint is. So if you don't have the carbs, I would in retrospect, I wouldn't probably change that before that. Adding carbs after being low carb for a long time helped me a lot with general feeling, how I can train, how much harder I can train, I mean, recovery time is much lower. I can work longer, I can work harder. It was nice to try low carb, but it won't be happening again.
Yeah. No, man, but that's also the beauty of experimentation, right? You come to find out what works for you and what doesn't, and what becomes sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to do it for a long time.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I tried the keto down to the point where you're measuring your ketones in your urine. I did that for 8 weeks, but it's like an eating disorder for me. I mean, I can't eat that. I can't. It didn't work well. I tried counting my macros, but that ends up that I have to almost weigh my food.
Yeah.
And as long as that happens, to me that feels almost like an eating disorder, because you have to control your food so much. So I just, for me, it doesn't work. I'm back to, I eat whenever I want, whenever I want it. Obviously, I think of not eating too much crap, but I have no things that I don't eat. And I'll eat candy if I feel like it. It's because I'm active enough to be able to do it. And I think that obviously that's also a thing, but I don't think that at least for me, it doesn't work to having to count or measure or doing all that. I might do that if I wanted to do like a weight cut or anything like just, and I could do that, but that would be because it's fun. But I do those things because I don't have a goal now. I don't have a fight train for. I don't have or to lose weight for or anything like that. So so
Mm-hmm.
losing weight for me now is kind of um, it's pointless. There's no need for it. I want to feel
Mm-hmm.
healthy and I want to feel strong.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for me that if I eat well and enough, I'll add weight.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I'll just play with the training. I do usually main things for me.
Mm-hmm.
All these has been for trying out. I want to
Mm-hmm.
try to see what happens.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
And that's again, like it's always good to try these types of things with that mindset and see what happens. Because I've
Hmm.
done strict keto as well.
Hmm.
I think that was 2018. So when I came back from Israel, doing the expert test, still
Hmm.
injured. The injury was worse actually, and it was also kind of like, okay, like I know this could help mitigate some inflammation and speed up the recovery process potentially.
Hmm.
But it was one of my major gripes with keto was measuring everything out, because a
Hmm.
classical keto would be like 70% of your intake would come from fat.
Hmm.
And yeah, that didn't last very long. I think after 2 to 3 months I was like, that is just way too much fat for me. Like it's not enjoyable. And I'm one
Oh,
of those types of people as well that I don't really like to track what I eat, in the sense like I don't need an app to tell me anything that I don't already know about myself, because of all the experimentation that I've done. I know which foods work for me and I know which foods don't, but it
yeah.
becomes this like myopic, like, oh, I need to, I don't know how much fat is in there if we're, talking
Yeah.
keto, but for
Yeah.
other people it could be, yeah, their macros just in general. So,
Yeah. And again, I mean, using apps and so on, if you have a certain goal and I mean, let's say somebody needs to lose weight and all that stuff,
mm,
measuring and so on, and being on in a calorie deficit and so on. I mean,
mm,
that's all good if you have a goal to be there,
mm,
and and some people might need it, but
mm,
if you don't, I mean, my feeling is just that a lot of the time your body knows what it needs,
yeah,
and when you've been training for a long enough time,
mm,
I mean, let's call it using the machine enough time, you usually knows what it needs
mm,
when it needs it.
yeah, 100%.
And it's like you get in touch with your how you work,
Mm,
and you refill and you drink whenever you need it.
mm,
I'm the same thing with when it comes to hydration. I'm not the person you'll find. I'll have this. I'll have coffee, but you won't find me with a water bottle everywhere.
mm,
Hydrating and all that stuff, because I don't have a need for it.
mm,
I'll drink when I'm thirsty, and I think that my body regulates that pretty well.
yeah.
And it's really hard to push your system.
Yeah. So that's also like a good case against a lot of standardization from the industry in intake, whether it is food or, hydration, water. And
Mhm.
it's also a really good case about, well, what they would call nutritional wisdom, which is the innate intelligence of the body, that it knows what it needs and will crave that or tell you that it needs it, which is a part of biofeedback as a whole, right? Which is, yeah, basically what people can get to if you experiment and self-experiment and track and maybe
Yeah.
measure does, yeah, can be beneficial with that as well. But it's
Definitely, but I mean, at the same time, if there's people who need that type of help, I mean, with
mm,
inflammations and with overweight, or need to put weight on, I mean,
mm,
it's both sides of the spectrum, right?
mm,
And I mean, there's educated people on that. Why there are too much of the. I've done it because I had no right. I've
mm,
never had a need to. I have to lose weight because
mm,
I'm too overweight, or I have to add weight because I'm too light.
mm,
But I mean, there's people who spend like years in universities on nutritional studies,
Mm.
and as long as the studies are working, I think that that's where we. Um, I think if there's a need for any of that,
Mm.
I think that's a good way to start. And then with that as a base, you can usually find your own needs in that
Mm.
sense. I don't know. That's the best word I can use. But
Yeah.
you find what you need
Mm.
when you have a good base of knowledge from somebody who's knowledgeable in it.
Yeah.
Um, so there, for me, there's a difference if there's somebody who needs
Mm.
really needs something
Mm.
for or somebody like me who wants to try out things and test them and see where it leads me
Mm.
and do my own kind of research on myself
Mm.
because I think it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a different thing, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
No, it is fun, and it can, like you said before in here, that it can be for better or for worse,
Yeah.
but at
Yeah.
least we can come back from that, right? So that's what
Mm.
matters.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm. So that's
Mm.
also a case for not being dogmatic, right? And being
Yeah.
flexible and just
Yeah.
experimenting, and then eventually kind of, yeah, feeling out what works for you. Because
Yeah.
one of the things that you said that I thought was interesting is that, I mean, I've never heard you mention it before anywhere else, is that that's the warrior diet, the type of prep you used for your fights. And when we talk about your fights, what actually inspired you to start doing professional fighting? Because you did 3 MMA fights
Yeah.
professionally. If yeah, okay.
Great. Yeah. Uh, it was, let's call it the fluke, that also same
Mm.
as with Krav Maga. So
Mm.
I was at the time I was at Fighter Center in Gothenburg, and I was coaching a few guys for their professional fights.
Mm.
It was Alexander Gustafsson, the Mauler,
Mm. Yeah.
and Anton Josef, Anton Mattsson, Eddie Bengtsson. Where there were a few guys I was helping them
Mm.
with kettlebell training for their professional fights. And basically every session we did, I did slow fighting with them as
Mm.
warm up, just
Mm.
play fighting. And I've known them for years. I mean, I did my first shoot fighting training back in '98, I think.
Mm.
So I've been doing shoot fighting. We've been traveling Sweden with shoot fighting and so on. We
Mm.
did like exhibitions in the shoot fighting in the pauses between the fights. When in the beginning we basically traveled all over Sweden, Denmark,
Mm.
Norway, did shoot fighting competitions. I didn't compete, but we did
Mm.
our exhibitions and we traveled with all the guys.
That's very
So
cool.
yeah, it was really cool, and I actually think that put a lot of the old Krav Maga schools, at least in Sweden,
Mm.
came, not a lot, but a few came because we did an exhibition in that city, and somebody saw the exhibition, and it kind of
Mm.
rolled into becoming an instructor. But anyway, so we did slow fighting as warm up, and I don't remember who said it, but one of them said like, so when you're signing up for a fight,
Mm.
I was like, no way, I'm not, no, I'm too old. That was my first answer. I was 37 at the time.
Mm.
So I signed up for a fight, did my first fight, that worked out well. I won
Mm.
by a TKO. And then I got the taste for it. It was fun.
Yeah.
So I did a second fight, broke a rib there, had a surgery, and that's how I started actually because I was coaching the guys
Mm.
with kettlebells to prepare for their fights.
Mm. And when you got into that, because you were already shoot fighting, the preparation, did you feel like you had to supplement with more striking, or was that something that also seemed, I mean, then you've been doing Krav Maga for quite some time already, so.
Yeah, so no, I didn't do anything else that I just did. I just started training more and prepping for the fights with the
Mm,
guys at that club,
mm,
and that was about it. And I mean, I've had done shoot fighting, but not that much. I
mm,
wasn't for a while. I did it like a few times a week, and then I didn't do it for a while because I had Krav Maga and teaching, and there was
mm,
other things that happened. But then when I decided to start to do or to do the fights, I definitely signed up.
mm,
Or it signed up, but I started training more regularly and prepping for the fights.
mm.
Yeah, so but I didn't have to add anything
Mm.
special. I mean, I started doing more MMA training. That's it.
No.
And like doing what needed to be done.
Mm,
Uh, there's a difference on MMA if you fight in a ring or if you
mm,
fight in a cage.
mm,
Because when you fight in a cage, you need to know how to work the cage.
mm,
You know how to press somebody, how to turn, how to get up against the cage, and how to use the cage to your advantage,
mm,
both offensive and defensive.
mm,
So yeah, training in a cage, training MMA, doing grappling, doing
mm,
striking, and stand up and everything that's in it. That
mm.
was what I started doing more.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you had your surgery, it was a metal plate and some screws that they put in.
Yes, 7 screws. I think I just put a picture up.
Yeah.
I think the set. Yeah, a metal plate. So one of the ribs came out of the cartilage
Mm,
at the sternum, and was broken. So there was 2 breaks in one,
mm,
uh, and so they cut a piece off of the rib because they were overlapping. I don't
mm.
know if you saw the picture that I posted
Yeah, I
a
saw
while
the
back.
picture.
They're overlapping. So they cut a piece there off, and they put a
Mm,
metal plate on. And then after the second fight, or the third fight, I don't remember exactly. The one of the screws came out of the bone.
oh, okay.
Uh, I didn't, I didn't actually. I didn't feel it. No, it
Okay.
was obviously I broke it in the second. So after the
Mm,
third fight and the prepping for the third fight,
mm,
um, the one of the screws came out of the bone. So when I pushed my chest out like this, the
mm,
screw pushed on there was like a little tent under the skin.
mm.
So they had to remove that plate and the screws again. Yeah.
How have your ribs been since then?
It's been good.
Yeah.
No, but so I had, because they cut like, I don't know, centimeter, half centimeters
Mm,
off. That rib is a little bit. It's a little bit problematic still.
mm,
Also, the fascia is connected to the muscles. So when I move, sometimes it's like
mm,
pulling on the fascia. The
mm,
skin is attached to the fascia.
mm,
And in the beginning, for the first year, I had a neck problem on the same side,
mm.
um, because everything was a little bit crooked movement-wise, right?
Yeah, makes sense. And
Yeah.
when we speak about movement, because that was also one of the, I think, a paradigm shift, maybe not just within the Krav Maga community itself, but I mean, it definitely was for us back in Belgium, or it
Hmm.
felt that way anyway, thinking back, and then here as well, was the
Yeah.
introduction of primal movement, which was one
Yeah.
of, I'm not sure where it came from, but that you were one of the first guys that I know that was talking about it, which is a locomotion style based
Yeah.
movement method. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not really a
So
program.
it is. It is a program. It was called Primal Move first, then it was
Mm,
called Primal Charge,
mm,
and now it has the name Ground Force Method.
mm,
And it's a movement based system that's based also on human development. It's
mm,
based on play. It's based on proprioception
mm,
and being able to move well before you move much. So it has a connection with the functional movement screening, or the
mm.
FMS.
Yeah.
It was created by Peter Lakatosh, who's also
Mm.
he's black belt, BJJ black belt, and
Mm.
Krav Maga expert 3, I think.
Right. Mm.
Yeah, expert 3. So he created that system, and I was kind of with him in a way when that
Mm.
happened. Um,
Cool.
I don't know if how much I influenced it, but we were talking about it, and he created the system, and then we started teaching it. And it's been some of the movements there, some of the stuff there has been really helpful with people. I've
Mm.
had some people who, but their double herniations in the lower back has become better, and they,
Mm.
tingling in the feet disappear and so on. So it's been really, really helpful, and it
Yeah.
helps me also sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Because we use it a lot as, well, let's say more of a natural approach to warming up and getting
Yeah.
people in the zone. And I really enjoyed it because I was already moving into more of a movement based approach, or not when I saw that in the beginning, because that was one of the
Mhm.
first introductions to locomotion that I had.
Yeah.
Maybe early 2014 or something. So when we speak about the movement community as we know it today, which is largely influenced by Ido Portal, that wasn't really, I mean, it was going on in the background, but that I wasn't connected to that at all.
No.
So when I saw the primal move and ground force method now, then I was like, oh, this is refreshing,
Yeah.
coming from, I mean, like the play element is also a really big aspect of that, as people stop playing and
Yeah.
they stop having fun and they stop doing a lot of these natural movements. But the
Yeah.
locomotion aspect of it and the flow element really
Yeah.
spoke to me personally. And it's something
Yeah.
that I used very often in the warm-ups and even as a cool down at times. And something that was really big here in Oslo, in Norway,
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
started, because the Scandinavian stronghold was ahead of the curve as usual.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so one of the benefits with like the warm up part of the ground force method, which is called the GFE, was a ground force exploration. I mean,
Mm,
that's made a little bit like a quick scan if you teach a group,
mm,
but it's also a really, really comprehensive and well connected warm up drill. It takes about
mm,
7-8 minutes if you do it and if you know how to do it, and it improves proprioception,
mm,
which means you decrease the risk of injury because your brain is reacting earlier to stuff.
mm,
You will have a better connection to your joints.
mm,
I mean, the brain connection to your joints, the
mm,
mechanoreceptors are being more efficient on sending signals to your brain,
mm,
which means that you'll naturally move better.
mm,
And usually we start at the feet,
mm,
move to the knees, hips, lower back, shoulders, arms, knees, hands, and kind of all the way through the system, and that gives it the natural way of moving.
mm,
And most people I use it with has a better toe touch without stretching their hamstrings
mm,
after doing that. So it's really helpful for just mobility and stability. As your
mm,
brain starts accepting your limitations of whatever you have, and as soon as you, let's call it, clear up the map a little bit,
mm,
it will start allowing more strength. It will start allowing more movement.
mm.
So
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Right, so that's a big one that, like, I've heard a lot of good feedback from that from other people, and a
Hmm.
lot of people here enjoyed it as well because
Yeah.
of, I mean, there's various levels of fitness, of course, and then movement, we could say intelligence, I guess. Like, if you haven't moved a lot throughout your life, then that skill hasn't been practiced, right? So your proprioception, your map isn't great. And when they
Yeah.
started getting that, we could see, yeah, not, it started always subtle, of course, but we
Yeah.
start seeing big changes in their movement capacity,
Mhm.
which was very
And
awesome.
I mean, the good thing with that is that it's so adapted, so everybody starts at their level. You don't need to be a really good mover to start using it, because you can do whatever you can. And as with everything else, the better you become, the more you improve your movements and your motoric capacities.
Mm.
So that's the benefit with that type, because you don't have to do any like really hard yoga stretches or any like, you know, there's nothing that's really hard in, let's say, for the GFE, for instance. Most people can do it, and you can always regress a little bit and do something that's here. If there's something you can't do, you'll stay there until you can move on to the next step. And that's one of the benefits with those systems. You don't need to do any advanced stuff, and you'll still get the results of it. I mean, every new skill you earn is a, you know, is something that will improve your movement skills.
Yeah, it was very accessible for people, and
Yeah.
it's fun to play with, right? So that was always a part of the feedback, that people really like the games that we would do or that we get from the course. So that was also like a major thing as a warm up, right? It's kind of, I believe, the number one thing for a lot of different things that you can use these types of games for, to get people in the right states to start training.
Yeah, definitely. As soon as people start playing, they usually start moving better, because they're relaxed. They leave the stress from work at work, and they kind of get it. I mean, that's how, when we teach a warm up with Krav Maga, right? One of the main things is to get them ready for the exercises. And part of that is getting in fighting is getting their fighting brain on. And that, in part of that is getting out of whatever else is in there, so that they're not occupied with thinking of if their boss was yelling at them at work. They can, as you talked about before, have flow and be here and now and be present in what they're doing. And that will in itself improve how they perform in the mats. And the game, getting people to laugh and relax, that's another parasympathetic response, right?
Yeah.
So you're more open to more susceptible to getting new information in. So it's kind of opening up your system and gets you a more efficient learner in that, and mover. Yeah, so it's really beneficial.
Yeah, totally. It's very cool to hear that from you.
Yeah.
I
Cool.
also wanted to ask about you've done some experimenting with breathing as well, right? The Buteyko method. You've done some of that, and I believe you're certified in it.
Yeah. So yes, I'm certified Buteyko clinic and Oxygen Advantage.
Cool.
And under Patrick McCown. And yeah, it's another thing that's really beneficial for people. It releases stress. I mean, in general, as soon as you start improving your oxygen uptake, good things happens to your pH levels. Good things happens to your system of transporting CO2 away. And it's vasodilating, it's bronchodilating, and when that happens, your heart rate can go down and your blood pressure can go down. And that is another parasympathetic response, which again improves life for most people, especially if stress is part of it, right? So,
it's definitely a part of life, stress.
Yeah. And with Oxygen Advantage, we also simulate high altitude training by lowering the SpO2. I mean, the oxygen levels in your blood, you lower them, and that actually will simulate high altitude training. So if you get low enough, the lower the oxygen levels get, the higher altitude.
So that's more of a performance application.
Yeah, yeah. So the Buteyko clinic is more towards asthma and health issues, while Oxygen Advantage is more pushing through towards athletic performance. High altitude training, it will affect the EPO of the blood and raise that, and it will increase the amount of red blood cells in your blood. It will increase the oxygen uptake and so on. So there's a lot of good benefits from the Buteyko, and there's a lot of good benefits from CO2 and nitric oxide in the right way. Yeah.
Nitric oxide, I mean, again, for people that wouldn't really know, is created when you're inhaling through your nose as to oppose to your mouth, right? You don't create it in nitric oxide then. So nasal breathing is an inherently important part of a molecule, nitric oxide, like that it gets created and used by your body in many different ways that are beneficial for your health.
Yeah, nasal breathing will increase CO2 levels because it's a smaller passage. It will humidify the air. It will, at the same time, as you said, create the nitric oxide that's created in your sinuses and this part of the face as you're inhaling. And those two gases, nitric oxide and CO2, are both vasodilating and bronchodilating, which again gives the benefits. So we need a certain level of CO2 in the arterial blood so that the oxygen doesn't get stuck to the hemoglobin. Because if that happens at the same time, you can't transport your CO2 away as you're being active. Yeah. So nasal breathing is extremely important.
Yeah, 100%. Have you tried doing some mouth taping, so then only nasal work when you're doing either the kettlebell work or some of the grappling?
No, I haven't taped, but I've been focusing on keeping my mouth shut while I'm doing it. But there's also a difference on how you work. I mean, if you do really explosive kettlebell work or punching, a lot of the time you use your mouth for exhalation, because there we use the biomechanical breathing match to create the inter-abdominal pressure that irradiates into your limbs for power generation. And obviously you can do that through the nose also, but it's usually much more natural to use it, especially for fighting and that type of activities when it's really explosive and fast. Because that is also sympathetic moves, if you think, it's fight and flight. It's you want to be on and you really want to go hard and use that part of your system as you're working. But using the nasal breathing in rest periods between sets, yes, I've done that a lot, and it helps. It helps really, really well. I have a good friend in Australia, Tim Almond. He does some of his sets with water in his mouth.
Really? So like the old school Spartan trick.
Yeah. So he puts water in his mouth and keeps it there throughout the session.
Impressive.
Which means nasal breathing is the only way, right? Yeah. So it's really beneficial to at least fight the urge to mouth breathe between sets. If you do a really, really hard set, sit down, relax, and just breathe through the nose and fight the urge to open the mouth. That will retrain your respiratory center to accept higher levels of CO2. And that in itself, again, as soon as you start accepting higher levels of CO2, that will naturally make you get winded later,
Yeah.
because CO2 is the response,
Mm.
or let's say feeling winded is the response to increased levels of CO2 in the
Mm.
arterial blood.
Mm.
And as soon as that happens, you'll start opening your mouth, which is a natural response to stress.
Mm.
That's like the boost that we need in the end when we really need it.
Mm.
But if we can fight that urge, that part of Buteyko training is to retrain your respiratory center to not react so
Mm.
early to CO2 raised or increased CO2 levels.
Mm.
And if you do that after a hard set, when your CO2 levels is high, it's going to be unpleasant sometimes.
I can
But that,
imagine.
that unpleasant feeling is your respiratory center reacting to the CO2 levels
Mm.
and wanting you to open to lower them.
Mm.
Okay, so there's different ways of doing that, of course. But keeping the mouth shut as you're
Mm.
as you're recovering between sets will naturally naturally increase that how you react,
Yeah.
or how you don't react, really. Yeah,
That's very powerful to play around with.
yeah, yeah.
I've done some of the Buteyko breeding, that I'm working with it, and yeah, it's been very good.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's really efficient. When I did it, now I do it like a normal way.
Mm.
I don't push anything. I just use it now and then. But for a while, when I started it, I was up to about 180 seconds after exhalation.
Mm. Of the breath hold,
Um,
right after exhalation. Yeah,
of breath hold after exhalation.
that's crazy.
After a normal exhalation, it's
Mm.
not an exhalation where you empty out everything. I
Mm.
mean, you measure by a regular
Mm.
exhalation through the nose. Uh,
Gotcha.
yeah. So there's a difference between that and completely
Mm.
emptying.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
And as to in regards to what you're doing now, like what's are you doing now? Like I guess you're using elements of all these things that we've discussed on a daily basis. And how does your training look? Because you're doing something 100 a day right now, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
100 reps a day, or
Yeah.
can you be more
100 reps a
specific?
day. No, so it started with me and a friend of mine.
Mm.
Uh, I started doing 100 swings per day.
Mm.
I think it was a little bit before New Year, like New Year's Eve, when the
Mm.
switch of the year. And then after a while, I just put up a Instagram post about 100 a day, and
Mm.
then I changed it a little bit, because I put you can do 1, 2, 3, or 4 exercises. Just do 4 movements,
Mm.
or any of those exercises, as long as you get 100 reps in per day.
Mm.
You can mix it. That can be 100 push-ups. It can be 25 out of 4 exercises. You can do them in a row. You can do them spread over the day.
Mm.
And for me, it's been mainly presses and squats and
Mm.
swings, snatches, the basic kettlebell exercises.
Mm.
There's no hard pressing. There's nothing maxing any time. There's nothing like really go, and there's no planning with it, and that's the
Mm.
good thing. Because I mean, if I have a goal and I want to go somewhere, I plan this training with cycles and
Mm.
so on. But now this is the 100 a day is just something that I do, so I get training every day.
Mm. Cool.
uh, some days it's really hard, some days it's not so hard.
Mm.
And regarding the breathing and the ground force method, I use them, not necessarily every day, but I
Mm.
use them, like
Mm.
ongoing.
Yeah.
Some days I'll do some more movement prep.
Mm.
Some days I'll do some more breathing and
Mm.
so on. Just I just use a little bit of everything where I do.
Mm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, man,
yeah.
that's part of the intuitive capacity once you start getting to know your body and
Mhm.
figuring out what you need per day or how you feel per day, right?
Yeah,
Which is also good that your intensities vary with
yeah,
your 100 a day. that
yeah.
that makes that
I mean,
slightly easier.
the 100 a day can be 100 stretches. I mean,
Mm.
whatever you want to do.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be. So if you have a hard day,
Mm.
you stressed, you didn't sleep well, you didn't eat well. There's so many things that can happen in life.
Mm.
To push your system with a really hard training session it can be counterproductive.
Mm.
So maybe that day just do 100 stretches of something. you
Mm.
know if you're doing yoga, do 100 yoga. If you're doing ground force method, just do 100 stretches or whatever.
Mm.
As long as you're doing 100 something per day,
Mm.
that was the main thing with that.
Yeah.
Some people has followed it. I think there's some guys who, since I put it up, they've done something every day.
Yeah. Awesome.
And yeah, it's really good. And for me, it's working wonders. I'm stronger than ever.
Well, there we go. And like for the general population, it's also beneficial. I mean, even if we would take strength out of the equation to just have movement throughout the day, right? Which is
Yeah,
more of the greasing the groove mentality that you could
yeah,
find in Pavel's thinking, which is just doing
yeah.
some things throughout the day. And even if it's like
Mhm.
not strength related, as you mentioned, that would already be beneficial for you to do that.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, because we are such a sedentary lifestyle now,
Mm.
most people, they general population, I would say, sit down more than they stand up.
Mm.
They sit and eat. They sit and watch TV. I'm part of that. Some days,
Mm.
I, you drive car sitting down. You spend your full day in front of a computer,
Mm.
and maybe you get an hour of training in the afternoon, right? I
Mm.
mean, that's normal life for most people now,
Mm.
or for a very big part of the population.
Mm.
I know Gray Cook used to say that if you're not moving around and walking around for 8 hours a day, you have a sedentary lifestyle, because
Mhm.
that's what we're created for,
Yeah.
as a species.
Mm.
And I like that idea that what I do isn't sport specific. We
Mm.
usually say that it's species specific.
Mm. That's a good one. Yeah.
I mean, it's I don't. If I let's say I take a look at the kettlebell swing, it's a hip hinge and explosive hip hinge, right?
Mm.
You can use that hip hinge and the explosive power from that in
Mm.
any sport that they needs power development. It's not sport specific for jumping or for that or for that. It's
Mm.
for everything,
Mm.
because most sport use that power position, that position of explosive power,
Mm.
and the endurance that you get from it, the strength that you get from it in your trunk and your torso, your hips, your knees. It's your species. I
Mm.
mean, the human body
Mm.
will become a more efficient human body if it's good at certain movements like hip hinge, squats, presses, pulls,
Mm.
walks. The movements that's usually called the main ones.
Mm.
And if we're good at those, everything else we do is usually easier.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't really believe in a sport specific training all the time. It's more,
Mm.
if I want to make the machine better, I want
Mm.
to make the machine move better, be more fluid in movement, and at the
Mm.
same time being better at producing power.
Yeah.
Um, and lift heavier things, and then basically the engine is bigger, so
Mm,
you have more power to push
mm,
whatever you need it.
totally. And out of all of this that we have been talking about now, if you would give people like either one thing to do or like one takeaway that they could start with tomorrow, what would you choose? Right, whether that's in breathing, nutrition, movements. I know it's a difficult one.
It's a really, really difficult question, but to be honest,
Mm,
what I had a lot of people who tried it would be the breathing, because breathing
mm,
is so systematic.
mm,
Oxygen, I mean, if you improve your oxygen uptake, if you get more oxygen to your brain, you'll be less stressed, you'll
mm,
be thinking better, you can run longer, you can lift
mm,
more, and so on and so on.
mm.
So breathing is one thing, but definitely I would, on the other hand, put kettlebells in people's hands.
Yeah.
Because what happens when you lift kettlebells is that you naturally start increasing your heart rate.
Mm,
So also there, your CO2 levels goes up. So it's part
mm,
of that retraining your whole system when you're active. So breathing is really easy to do. Just
mm,
don't, don't breathe with your mouth.
mm,
Put a piece of tape on it when you sleep.
mm.
But no, I would say kettlebells to
Yeah.
start lifting.
Mm.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. I
Yeah.
think that kind of covers my questions for you. So
Cool.
I think for the end here, you can just tell people where they can either connect with you or find more of your work, or because I remember that you also offer online coaching, right? Which is
Yeah.
in kettlebells, Krav Maga, and I'm guessing Buteyko as well.
Anything I do.
Okay.
But right now I'm doing. I got like memberships.
Mm,
So you can choose whatever you want to do in
mm,
whatever I have. Most
mm,
people do the kettlebells.
mm,
Some people do Krav Maga.
mm,
A little bit different between their personal needs, and some people
mm,
do both
mm,
because they kind of interconnect. But they'll find me at Tommy Blom at
mm,
Instagram.
mm,
Tenacity.se is the
mm,
website,
mm.
and that's the main channels.
Yep.
You just connect with me there with the DM or something, and
Mm,
if if there's anything I can do, it would be nice
mm.
to start working.
Awesome. All right, then we'll send people your way, and I'll put
Thank,
everything in the descriptions.
yeah,
All right.
cool, man.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
With Tommy, I think there's a lot of room for different philosophies in everything, whether that's training and nutrition. The main takeaway of the things we talked about when it comes to these things is that context matter for everything you want to do, achieve, improve, or change. If you're struggling with your nutrition, then I think it's important to think about what's necessary for you, as we sort of talked about. And if there's inflammation or intolerances, you need to keep that in consideration when choosing your nutritional protocol. For everything we've said, right, it opens up its own rabbit hole. I've put in some of these uh, links in the resources that you can look into, like breathing, like nutrition, like movement. If you have questions about any of these things, you can post them in the comment section below in this video. As a closing thought, when it comes to nutrition, I really believe that you should do what works for you and what feels right for you at that given stage that you're in. And if you want to support the podcast, please share this video, like it, comment, tell people about it. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.